Your manager doesn't need to say, prove your loyalty, for it to be a test. It happens while you're closing your laptop, while a meeting winds down, while the room feels relaxed enough that your guard drops. They ask something small, something that sounds like a friendly check-in on how you're doing. And whatever you say becomes part of the private risk file they keep on you. Not because every manager is scheming, but because managers are always trying to answer one question before it becomes official. Are you still fully here, or has part of you already checked out? I've sat on the other side of these conversations. I've built compensation plans, sat in calibration meetings, and watched managers quietly decide who gets protected in a layoff and who gets left exposed, based on nothing more than how someone answered a hallway question. This channel exists to translate that side of the room into something you can use. So if that's helpful, the subscribe button gets more of it to people who need it. Today, 6 ordinary sounding questions your boss might ask you this month, what they're actually measuring, and how to answer without handing over more than you meant to. Let's be clear about what loyalty actually means to a company, because it isn't what most people think. Your employer doesn't need you emotionally devoted. It needs you predictable, discreet, and steady enough that you won't create instability when pressure hits. That's a lower bar than devotion, and it's why loyalty tests rarely sound like loyalty tests. They sound like small talk, like a manager who's simply curious how you're doing. Here's the uncomfortable part. Your manager can genuinely care about you and still be gathering information at the same time. A manager's concern about your loyalty usually shows up before a resignation, before a formal complaint, before a conflict becomes paperwork. They notice your energy shift, notice you've stopped volunteering, notice you no longer light up when someone mentions next year's plans. They don't know if you're burned out, quietly job hunting, or just going through something personal. So instead of asking directly, they create small openings for you to reveal your position on your own. You think you're having a conversation. They're reading your posture, timing, and risk level all at once. Here's where that reading happens most. The first one is simple. Are you happy here? It tends to surface after a rough quarter, a reorganization, or after you've gone unusually quiet in meetings. Most people answer with their emotions, saying they're exhausted, frustrated, or unsure. That might be honest, but to your manager, it lands as a live retention update. They're not just hearing your mood, they're hearing whether you're still mentally inside the company, still manageable, and whether they need to start quietly planning for your exit. The fix isn't fake positivity. Manufactured enthusiasm is easy to spot, and a manager who's paying attention will hear the performance in it. What works better is controlled specificity. Something like, I'm putting real effort into the work in front of me, and I'm also trying to get a clearer read on how the next few months are going to be prioritized. That doesn't hand them your disappointment as raw material. It keeps you professional while quietly asking for clarity. You're not promising forever. You're confirming you're engaged with what's in front of you right now. The second question is some version of, have you talked to anyone outside the company lately? Sometimes it's playful, like they picked up a rumor. Sometimes it's dressed as mentorship. You're talented. I wouldn't blame you for looking around. That can even be sincere, but underneath it is a market check. Your manager wants to know if another employer has entered the picture because the moment one does, your leverage shifts. You stop being a contained employee and start looking like a vacancy with a countdown clock they can't control. Most people overshare because they think honesty builds trust, or deny too hard, which reads as defensive either way. You don't need to mention recruiters, interviews, or industry chats. Once those details are in your manager's head, they become operational. If they know you're actively looking, they might quietly redirect sensitive projects, hold back long-term planning, or hand the next big opportunity to someone who looks less likely to walk. A cleaner answer sounds like, I keep my relationships warm across the industry, but my focus is on what I'm responsible for here. That doesn't pretend you live with zero network, and it doesn't hand them a live map of your search. You're setting a boundary without making it sound like a threat. Warm, limited, unremarkable. If you're already replaying a conversation from the last few weeks in your head, that's the point. These questions work because they don't feel like they matter in the moment. That's the design. Stick around because the next few quietly shape whether you get the promotion, the project, or the exit. And most people get them wrong without realizing it cost them anything. Question 3 is, what do you think about the changes leadership is making? This one disguises itself as a strategy conversation. Your manager isn't asking whether the new operating model makes logical sense. They're asking whether you're aligned with the people above them. Answer like an outside commentator and you can damage yourself fast. You say the reorg feels rushed or the budget cuts are short-sighted. You might be right, but being right isn't the issue. Audience is. Criticizing a process is safe. Evaluating specific senior people's judgment out loud creates a political signal. Your manager now has to decide if you're a thoughtful operator or someone who might quietly undermine the change out of the room. During transitions, managers get highly sensitive to private resistance because they're judged on whether their team visibly accepts the new direction, not just whether it performs. A steadier answer separates implementation from ideology. Try, I'm still working through the full reasoning, but I'm focused on understanding what it means for our team and where I can be useful. That's cautious without sounding hollow, and it tells your manager you might have opinions without becoming a source of quiet resistance, which in a lot of workplaces matters more than being right in the moment. Question 4 is, how are you feeling about the team lately? It usually surfaces after conflict, turnover, or a meeting where the energy was off. Say something like, people seem checked out, or nobody trusts the direction we're going. And you've made yourself the unofficial spokesperson for a mood your manager can't independently verify. What they might hear is that a quiet coalition is forming outside their view. Managers worry about coalitions because coalitions shift power. One unhappy employee is manageable. 3 comparing notes can turn into an escalation or an HR situation. That's why team morale questions are sometimes really about you. Are you observing the room, or have you become the center of the complaints? Are people coming to you instead of your manager? If your answer sounds too plugged in, they might start seeing you as a channel to monitor rather than a resource. The response you want is narrow, not secretive. I've heard a range of reactions, and I think most people are looking for clarity on priorities. That's useful without naming names, emotions, or alliances. If there's a real issue, take it through the appropriate channel. The person who describes the room too precisely can start to look, in a manager's mind, like the person who's quietly running it. Question 5 is, do you still see yourself growing here? It sounds like a career check-in, but pay attention to timing. Right before budget season, calibration, or a major assignment decision, it's also an investment question. Should your manager push for your promotion, put you in front of leadership, or fight for your raise? Loyalty shapes investment, even when nobody says that part out loud. A lot of people sabotage themselves here, answering with uncertainty because they're hoping for reassurance. Honestly, just don't know. I feel stuck. I'm not sure there's a real path for me. That might be true, but it signals the investment might not convert into someone who stays. In a normal workplace, that opportunity quietly redirects to whoever creates less uncertainty, not because they're better, but because they're easier to plan around. A stronger answer keeps your ambition inside the company without begging for reassurance. Try, yes, I do see growth here, and I'm trying to get clear on which skills would make me more credible for the next level. That gives your manager something usable, frames you as worth investing in, and puts the responsibility back on them to define the path. If they can't answer clearly, that's information too, but you won't have sounded checked out, you'll have sounded strategic. Before the last one, tell me in the comments which of these 5 has actually been asked to you recently, close to word for word. I read through them, and it tells me exactly which pattern is showing up most right now. The 6th one is the one people misread most, because it doesn't sound like a loyalty test at all. It sounds like your manager finally treating you as an equal. Question 6 is, what would you do if you were in my position? It can feel flattering since your manager is asking for your judgment, but be careful. Sometimes they're testing whether you identify with management or with the people underneath them, what you'd sacrifice, who you'd protect, whether your instincts line up with the people making hard calls. It's a loyalty test wearing the costume of a hypothetical, and it shows up most during periods of political pressure. The mistake most people make is answering from frustration. I'd stop protecting the people who keep failing, or I'd cut out the politics entirely. Those answers might reflect your real values, but they also tell your manager you see them, even quietly, as part of the problem. And once they sense that distance, they pull back. You'll notice fewer candid conversations and less access to the thinking behind decisions that affect you. A better answer works in 2 layers. Acknowledge the constraint, then name the principle. I'd want to understand the real business constraint first, then communicate clearly enough that people know what's actually changing and what isn't. That shows you understand managers operate inside limits they didn't choose, while still caring how decisions land on people. Lean to employee and you sound oppositional. Lean to management and you sound opportunistic. The safest signal is measured judgment under pressure, especially when everyone else is reacting purely on emotion. Now, before this turns into paranoia, let's slow down. Not every casual question from your manager is a trap. Some ask because they're genuinely trying to retain you. Some ask because they're inexperienced and don't know a better way to open a hard conversation. Some sense something's off and are fumbling toward it. The goal isn't to treat your manager like an opponent. It's to remember their curiosity has consequences. And once you answer, that answer doesn't stay contained to the moment it was asked. It becomes part of how they forecast you the next time pressure shows up. 3 signs a question is genuinely a loyalty probe rather than an innocent check-in. First, timing. It shows up right after you go quiet, right after leadership changes, right after a colleague resigns, or right after your manager picks up on a shift in the market. Second, repetition. They ask a version of the same question in different wording, spread across several weeks. Third, follow-up. A normal question ends when you answer it. A probe keeps circling back, asking who else feels that way, what you've heard, or what it would take to keep you around longer. When you notice that pattern, slow down. Don't answer from relief because the conversation feels friendly. Don't answer from fear because you assume they already know something. Don't answer from resentment just because you finally have an opening to vent. If there's something serious you genuinely need to disclose, do it deliberately, through the right channel, using language you'd be comfortable seeing repeated back to you in a summary you didn't write. It also helps to keep your own record. And I don't mean a dramatic file, just a simple private note outside company systems. The date, the question, the context, what you said back. If your manager asks whether you're happy the same week you requested a raise, write it down. Patterns are almost impossible to see while you're living inside them, but a short, boring record gives you distance. It's the difference between recognizing a manager who's just awkward and one who's quietly building a risk profile on you before acting on it. One quick note, since this touches on workplace dynamics rather than formal legal advice, what an employer can or can't hold against you varies by state and by company policy. So if a situation ever escalates into something that feels retaliatory, that's worth a conversation with an employment attorney or HR, not just a video like this one. Here's the bigger pattern underneath all six. Loyalty tests at work almost never ask, "Are you loyal to us?" They ask if you're happy, connected, aligned, still growing, listening to the room, or already picturing yourself somewhere else. They come wrapped in ordinary language because ordinary language gets the most honest answers. Your job was never to lie in these moments. Your job is to stop treating casual access to your inner thoughts as something you automatically owe your employer.